Then we go to, I hope the so-called senior panel can match the energy. These people brought the goods home, and we are excited to see how you follow. So we'd like to welcome you, please, senior panel. But this time, they have done it in such a way that they wanted us to do you in two halves. It's not me, it's the rules. I'm just playing by the rules. So we will have Nene MC Cham. We will have Mr. Hausum Sise. And we'll have SG Salimata E.T. Toure. And we'll have Esa Bokar C. That's my first half. Then we come to the second half. The first speaker is in private legal practice and in active general practice since November 2000. She's recognized for her commitment to advocating for and defending human rights in general and rights of women and children in particular. She's a legal consultant on women and children rights. Driven by her passion for the pursuit of justice for all and equal opportunities for women, children, the youth, and vulnerable members of society, Nene is renowned for her contribution towards uplifting their legal and socio-economic status. This is particularly evident from the pro bono legal services she offers on all issues in all courts of the land, and as well as the trainings in communities across urban and rural Gambia on human rights, democracy, rule of law, and access to justice. She was the recipient of the award for the most outstanding woman legal practitioner in March 2020 at the maiden edition of the SHE Awards here in the Gambia. She is the past president of the Female Lawyers Association of the Gambia, FLAG. More recently, in 2018, she served as vice chairperson to the Faraba Bantam Commission of Inquiry. Since 2017, she has been actively engaged in transitional justice process. She is currently chairperson to the board of the National Agency for Legal Aid, NALA, member of the General Legal Council, board member of the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce, and other CSOs, professional bodies, and that share her passion and vision both in the Gambia and abroad. She is fluent in French, I am sure in Fula as well. That's a language. And definitely, we think you're not going to deliver in French, but in English. Please, hands together for Nene MC Cham.
Good morning, good afternoon. May I stand on existing protocols from previous panel? My fellow panelists and everybody here present, I am honored indeed to be here this afternoon as a panelist on this very important topic. It's very refreshing. Not that the pomp and ceremony and the reception and all the other ways that we have used to celebrating the independence is not nice, but it's good to have a dialogue also. So I commend, Mrs. Sisoho and her team for organizing it. We stand only to benefit from this exchange of ideas today. As we celebrate the 58th Independence Day, it is important that we reflect on our values and principles that have guided us as a nation, that have shaped the democracy we cherish today. The topic is indeed timely at this critical juncture in our nascent democracy, needing much nurturing. Democracy is a system of government in which power is vested in the hands of the people and exercised through representatives. We all know that. It is also a form of governance that upholds fundamental human rights and privileges and guarantees the freedoms of speech, assembly, and expression. Democracy is a recipe for peace and development, indeed, in that it provides a platform for citizens to engage with their government and to participate in decision-making. So that's just my take on what democracy is and does. And in practice, the various government departments, we have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary for the very important work they do. I want to focus, with my background, obviously, coming from the legal field, because the topic is so wide and broad, like previous speakers have said, I decided to just focus on what is in my backyard, shall I say. And that is to say that the judiciary, which is the third arm of government, is responsible for interpreting the laws and ensuring that they are applied fairly and justly. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there is a need to deepen our understanding of democracy, the meaning of democracy. And looking at the seasoned members, particularly on this panel, and dare I say also the previous panel, I'm jealous, Adaikumba, I told you, I'm not included in your panel. Young. But it's a pleasure to be here. Now, I decided with this background that as an actor in the legal field, my presentation on the topic will focus and reflect on the rule of law as a vital consequence of peace and development. In simple terms, democracy focuses on how societies select those who will uphold power, while the rule of law is concerned with how political power is exercised. That means every citizen is subject to and accountable under the law and are equal before the law. Rule of law defended by an independent judiciary plays a crucial function ensuring that civil and political rights are safe and that the equality and dignity of all citizens are assured and protected. We know that the law is a last resort for most of us when we are wronged, when we need clarification, interpretation of the law, when crimes are committed, when we have disputes in civil cases. So it is very, very vital that it is upheld in a very vibrant democracy. Now, in building democracy and the rule of law may be mutually reinforcing processes. The rule of law is a critical factor in the advancement of democracy, being rooted in equal rights and accountability, as earlier said by some speakers. So by strengthening the rule of law and its institutions, we protect the rights of all people, we advance inclusiveness, and we limit the arbitrary exercise of power, which are the cornerstones of modern democracy. In 2012, United Nations meeting of the General Assembly on rule of law declared, and I quote, "The advancement of rule of law at the national and international levels is essential for sustained inclusive economic growth, sustainable growth, eradication of poverty and hunger, and the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the right to development, all of which in turn reinforce the rule of law." So basically, what it says is that if the law works, if the system works the way it is supposed to be, we get to enjoy all of this. That's how we get peace, because people aren't killing each other, they're resorting to the law that works. That's why the system must work. We must have the institutions strengthened in capacity, not just the Ministry of Justice in this case, but other government agencies and all the actors, so that each is able to do its job properly. Cases are disposed of speedily and efficiently, and confidence in the workings of the judiciary is maintained. Now, by strengthening the rule of law and its institutions, we protect the rights of all people. We advance inclusiveness, as I said, I think I just read that. But one may wonder how the law enables economic development. I wondered, I thought, okay, rule of law, development, it's okay. Because rule of law is a vital component of democracy. And so that's why I decided to focus on it. And the answer I come across include protection of individual property rights, yes. In practice, that's what it means. It protects, if it works well, your property rights are protected. You get fair and equitable contract enforcement. Yes. Somebody breaches a contract. We enter into contracts and agreements every day in our everyday life. That's just even jeda si marse bi. If you're not able to enforce that, there is a problem. The creation and enforcement of equitable labor laws, employment laws. I'm sorry, it's a bit technical, not as fun, but that is the reality of the work that we do, engaged in ensuring that the rule of law is upheld, and creating access and opportunity for all, and this includes women. Earlier speakers spoke about how women need to be more empowered, need to be more included if this democracy is going to work. We are 51% of the population. And inclusion doesn't just mean the clapping and being present. It means being in decision-making positions, being in the National Assembly, being anywhere from the top, where decisions are made that affects the lives of men, women, and children of this country. And also vulnerable groups in this society. And here I join one of the speakers when they said, we have the laws. Yes, we have the laws. But do we implement them? If we do not implement them, maybe that's something we need to work on moving forward. Because we have the laws and the policies, but what do we do to make them a reality in the lives of people? I think of the Disability Act. And I would like to know what, if anything, has happened to begin to implement the Disability Act. I don't know what a person with disability would tell me if I tell them that we have democracy in the Gambia here. What are they enjoying? They can't even get access to go to many big government buildings, as simple as access. So I can go on and on about that, but not only must these rights be provided for, they must be enjoyed. Must be enjoyed. Yes, almost done. So, in short, when citizens are treated fairly and with dignity and respect, it creates a culture where commerce and business can flourish and grow. We've heard from the MD of Trust Bank. Democracy paired with fair and equal application of the law at all levels of society and government are necessary for strong and sustainable economic growth. I just want to quote, allow me, that's why I wrote, because I knew that if I got off the script, I will be out of time. Just allow me to read the last bit. The UN Commission on Legal Empowerment of the Poor, final report, 2008 reads, the rule of law is not merely an adornment to development. It is a vital source of progress. It creates an environment in which the full spectrum of human creativity can flourish and prosperity can be built. Another aspect of the topic that is also close to my heart that I would like to speak on, ladies and gentlemen, is the importance of tolerance in society, in a democratic society. It would provide a more cohesive, peaceful society. It is believed that people who are free to express themselves without fear of persecution are likely to live happier lives as functional members of the society. The contestation of ideas and divergent viewpoints must never be suppressed, for that goes against the ideals of constitutional democracy. Democracy is about accepting and respecting the right to differ, as well as acceptance of such differences at all. We in Africa, the Gambia included, must really interrogate the way we view the opposition and its role in democracy. And here I think of elected members of parliament on the opposite side of the government in any parliamentary system. It is indispensable component of democracy. Minority parties play a key role in holding government to account and in providing alternative policy options for public consideration. I think of honorable members such as Uncle Halifa Sallah and the immeasurable contribution he has made to scrutinizing before these laws are passed in the National Assembly. So the opposition has rights and duties that enable it to make effective contribution to the democratic process. These rights, like all rights, however, must be exercised within the ambit of the law. I must not forget civil society organizations and their contributions, and other community-based organizations and advocacy groups who play a pivotal role in promoting democracy, peace, and development. They provide a space, like previous speakers said, for citizens to engage with their government and to participate in policy-making processes. Through their efforts, advocacy efforts, they help to ensure that the rights and interests of marginalized and vulnerable groups are represented. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as a nation for all these reasons, the Gambia must aspire to have one of the best democracies in the world. And why not? I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll try to be on time. We've lost, I know it's not the fault of the panelists, of course, but let's try to maintain the 10 minutes. That way we get out of here. We've spent the whole day here virtually now. The next speaker is a leading Gambian historian, author, copyright expert, and cultural administrator. His earlier works on Gambian history include 2 books on the role of women in Gambian history, and the first full-length biography of P.S. Njai, the Gambian nationalist leader, titled Founding Father P.S. Njai, A Moral Biography, the Gambian National Museum Publishing, 2018. His articles have also appeared in leading history journals such as Journal of Mandé Studies, Africa, Journal of the International African Institute, SOAS Bulletin, and African Economic History Journal. He's currently Director General, National Center for Arts and Culture. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hausum Sise.
Actually, honorable ministers present, Your Excellency, former Vice President, the Secretary to Cabinet, the Cabinet Secretary, the Chief of Staff, Secretary General, Office of the President, senior civil servants, religious leaders. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you, civil society, the press. I want to start to say that the multi-party democracy we have in the Gambia is real because it dates to 1951. Therefore, we have seamlessly experienced 72 years of uninterrupted multi-party democracy. This illustrious record has served, and we can see in it several characteristics: inclusion, regular multi-party free and fair elections, right to assembly, media rights, strict adherence to human rights-based foreign policy, and accountability. Now, I also should say in passing that it is to the credit of this democratic experience that so far we have had no leader who has attempted to truncate the lifespan of our parliament. Our parliaments, for example, have never been prorogued or dissolved before it was due. Indeed, from 2019 to 2022, His Excellency President Adama Barrow became a good example of an African leader who coexisted with what was a hostile parliament. Now, in the craft of history, we want to focus so that we are able to really go into detail. I just want to use the Kukoi Sambasanyang attempted coup of 1981 as a case study to show that we have had a very, very strong, resilient, and very responsive democratic experience. On 30 July 1981, Kukoi Sambasanyang led a band of rebels to attempt to overthrow the PP government. In the ensuing mayhem of 6 days, 1,000 Gambians died, dozens were raped. The Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry estimated that the loss due to looting of private businesses was $42 million, that is 1982 dollars. But what was outstanding about this calamity was the measured government response, which was dictated by our democratic credentials. For example, every attempt was made to ensure that rights were protected. Over the 1,100 people who were arrested for alleged involvement in the coup, 800 were released without legal recourse. Also, the names of all those arrested were published in the Gazette to ensure accountability and protection of basic rights. There was no missing prisoner. Of course, there were mass graves, but we had mass graves only because of the mass murder that the Kukoi coup brought about. Now, there was a detainee review panel which was established 2 days after Sadaura arrived from Dakar to ensure that no one remained in detention if no hard evidence was gathered against them. Those who were tried were allowed legal representation, sometimes at cost to government. The government also allowed the Red Cross and the Amnesty International to visit all the detainees at the Mile 2 prisons or at the Bakau Depot or other detention centers spread throughout the country to ensure the rights of detainees were protected. There was no summary justice, there was no summary execution. The PPP government ensured that every prisoner had their day in court. There were this was done through various court chambers presided by judges from Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria to hear the charges against the prisoners. The Commonwealth Law Society was brought in so as to ensure that the court proceedings were regularly monitored to ensure free and fair trials. Of the 27 death sentences given, none was executed, meaning nobody was hung or sent to the firing squad. Indeed, by 1990, all those jailed for the coup attempt had been set free in amnesties. Of course, there was a state of emergency, but it did not hinder the work of the press, neither did it hinder political activity. Indeed, by April 1982, Gambians were again called to the polls in a fresh general election to elect their leaders in multi-party, free democratic elections. The leader of the opposition, NCP, Sirif Mustafa Diba, contested the elections whilst on remand for treason charges at the Mile 2. This was, of course, another unthinkable democratic pace in Africa of the 1980s. To ensure accountability, a looted items recovery panel was also created, led by Alaji Keba Conte, a former mayor of Banjul. The panel worked very hard to recover every looted goods back to their owners. All told, the handling of the Kukoi Sambasanyang coup ensured that there was no impunity, that there was accountability, and the rule of law was upheld and basic human rights protected. It was likely due to this measured manner that the Gambia handled the aftermath of this calamity, that it won the moral right to champion human rights in Africa, and the Gambia and Banjul became the capital of human rights in Africa and the Commonwealth. To further ensure accountability, the PPP government established a commissioner for external aid, who was appointed, a senior civil servant was appointed, to handle the $30 million that flooded the country in foreign aid to help us get out of the calamity that this coup brought about. Our friends gave us over $30 million. In furtherance of this desire for accountability, which is a key facet of democracy, in 1983, an Anti-Corruption Assets Evaluation Commission was established. Anti-corruption magistrates sent people to jail for graft. Cabinet ministers got arrested and tried for corruption. Like in all democracies, the Gambia fought corruption. The Kukoi Sambasanyang coup attempt, paradoxically, continued, in fact, to strengthen our democratic gains. Like I said, elections followed in April 1982, and for the first time, Jawara asked for a quick constitutional review to allow Gambians to elect him directly. Also, the opposition leader, SM Diba, got nominated for these presidential elections and for his MP seat whilst doing time at the Mile 2 prisons, answering to charges of treason, for which he was acquitted in May 1982. Our political leaders over the past 58 years, whether they are opposition or elected, have embraced the rule of law. In 1960, the PPP went to court to contest elections it believed were stolen. In 1962, the UP went to court to contest elections it believed were stolen. As recently as 2021, the UDP went to court to contest elections it believed were stolen. 30 years earlier, in 1992, 3 MPs lost their seats when a court ordered their elections as ineligible. Our political leaders, to their credit, believe in courts and not in riots and flames in the streets to settle election disputes. This is a pride of Gambian democracy. Furthermore, of the 14 coups, attempted coups, foil coups, coup plots that we have registered in this country since 1981, there has never been a single one in which a serving party leader has been found to have conspired or organized or funded. This is another credit to our political class. To conclude, our democracy, therefore, has done us good. It's a fount of hope. You cannot be hopeless in a multi-party democratic system like ours, because at least you have the hope that every 5 years you will have the possibility to elect your leaders. Our democracy has brought us international support after 1965, during the oil crisis of '73 and the Sahelian drought. Yet, when our friends broke basic universal human rights, we dumped them. That is why the Gambia severed diplomatic ties with Russia when it invaded Afghanistan in 1979. The Gambia boycotted the 1972 Olympic Games and the 1976 Olympic Games because these countries were supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa. Therefore, our democracy dictated an ethical foreign policy. Our democracy helped to win us respect throughout the world. It has protected us from probable Senegalese threats to our sovereignty in 1971 and in 1973. It has helped us to remain stable, to promote our tourism sector. We dare say that if we continue to wear our multi-party democratic system, it will continue to assure us of a republic that is strong and steady.
The Walking Library of the Gambia, encyclopedia, if you will. House and Sisi, ladies and gentlemen. A career diplomat with extensive bilateral and multilateral diplomatic experience acquired over 20 years. She began her foreign service career as cadet administrative officer in 1993 and rose through the ranks to become acting deputy head of mission and head of chancellery at the Gambian embassy in Brussels. Between 2010 and 2012, she worked for the UNDP Gambia Country Office as National Project Coordinator for the Gambia Priority Employment Project, GAMJobs. Mrs. Toure received her BA and Masters in French and Modern Languages in Literature in France. She is currently the Secretary General and Head of the Civil Service, and previously Deputy Secretary General and Head of the Diplomatic Service. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary General, Salimata E.T. Toure.
Well, let me stand on existing protocols to greet everyone from this podium. Let me start also by thanking the organizers for inviting me to serve as a panelist. I also want to congratulate my compatriots on attaining the Gambia's 58th independence anniversary. On such an auspicious occasion, we pay tribute to forefathers like Kwame Nkrumah, who enjoined his peers to seek first the political kingdom and everything else shall be added unto it. That call was heard across Africa, and on our shores, illustrious sons such as Pierre Njai, Edward Francis Small, Reverend John Kolifai, and Sadauda Kairaba Jawara took up the battle to free our country from the yokes of colonialism. As a young state, author Barclay Rice described the Gambia as an improbable nation, and as it were, an improbable nation was born. The Gambia attained the political kingdom with peculiar development challenges relative to our small size, limited natural resources, and underdevelopment. Despite the political and socio-economic difficulties, the improbable nation recorded many positive achievements in the areas of democracy, human rights, and foreign policy. Regrettably, the advent of a 22-year dictatorship brought about a destruction of institutions and arrested development. Fast forward to 2023, and we are still striving to add everything else to our political kingdom. As a civil servant and a citizen, my reflections on the theme, democracy and a recipe for peace and development, will be framed from the civil service perspective and structured around the following 4 principles: the rule of law, the rights and obligations of citizens, institution building, and the role of education in our democracy. Firstly, the rule of law implies that every citizen is subject to and accountable under the law. This includes lawmakers and those in government leadership positions who, under previous models of dictatorships and authoritarian rule, wouldn't be. The rule of law and democracy are therefore interlinked, and the former being a critical factor in advancing the latter. The rule of law is rooted in equal rights and accountability. By strengthening it, we are protecting the rights of all Gambian citizens, advancing inclusivity in our society, and limiting the abuse of power by government officials. Strengthening the rule of law goes beyond the application of its norms and procedures, and it should also emphasize the substantive element of the values it seeks to uphold, such as inclusivity, justice, and democratic governance. However, it is not enough to simply nail the substantive elements of the rule of law, but also ensure that its application promotes the intended outcomes. This can only be done by ensuring that government officials and national institutions are also bound by the rule of law and not above it. As Massimo Tomasoli puts it, constitutional limits on power are a vital feature of democracy which requires adherence to the rule of law. This begs the question, what should we as a nation do to improve the status? 1, holding government officials accountable for abuses of power and misuse of public resources. 2, having a system of checks and balances in place for institutions and individuals to minimize the risks of abuse of power. 3, ensuring that national institutions protect the rights enshrined in the constitutions and the citizens are aware of those rights. 4, upholding Gambian values of inclusivity, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and assembly. Secondly, the rule of law is thus closely related to the rights and obligation of citizens. The viability of the rule of law ultimately depends on citizens exercising their right to vote. And in doing so, citizens have the responsibility to elect officials that will uphold and be accountable under the law. Citizens must also agree to abide by the rules and obligations by which they are governed. And equally, the government must grant the rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. Thirdly, in a democracy, institutions promote the creation and maintenance of orderly processes by which decisions are made, disputes are resolved, and power is transferred from one institution or group to another. The importance of quality governance remains paramount at both national and local levels, as better solutions are needed for complex problems. Although strong and stable institutions are not an absolute guarantee of effective local governance, they remain the best weapons in the fight against abuses of power, misuse of public resources, and miscarriages of justice. At the national level, delineations must be clear between the executive, the legislative, and judicial branches of government to ensure that each branch can carry out its function effectively and is held accountable to others. Such a separation limits the possibility of abuse of power by individuals or branches of government and allows for each branch to have separate powers and independent areas of responsibility. At the local level, institutions must have clear organizational structures and transparent governance to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. Poor governance puts institutions at risk of being vehicles for advancing personal goals rather than delivering national priorities. In these instances, what can the government and the governed do to minimize such risks? 1, ensuring that all institutions have a clear mandate, defined areas of responsibility, and adequate resources to carry out their functions effectively. 2, minimize the overlap between the institutions and avoid redundancies, inefficiencies, and conflict between institutions. 4thly, to protect democracy and strengthen Gambian values, it is essential to foster a more robust understanding of fundamental democratic principles. The link between education and democracy can therefore not be understated, as the role our education system plays in promoting our democracy has never been more critical. It is the primary method by which 2 minutes. It is the primary method by which we can still instill democratic principles in the younger population. Still, it suffices not only to teach democracy, but for our educational institutions to embody it as well. A functioning democracy centers education as a main priority, which in turn fosters a democratic temper in the minds of people. In essence, education and democracy are in a symbiotic relationship where the success of one is dependent on the success of the other. In order to ensure that our education serves our democracy and vice versa, we must provide our schools and universities with the tools and resources to encourage civic engagement among students and promote democratic discourse. This can be done in various ways. 1, embedding the national government curriculum with civic education that will teach students about the tenets of democracy, the rights and obligations of citizens, and reinforce core Gambian values. Conducting workshops in collaboration with National Youth Council to highlight the work being done at the youth level and emphasize the importance of political participation. 3, implementing extracurricular activities such as Model United Nations or similar activities across multiple schools that simulate democratic discourse at the local level. 4, providing internship opportunities for students to gain practical experience in policy making at national level. Fellow Gambians, in conclusion, these are my thoughts on how democracy can be a recipe for peace and development in the Gambia. But as the saying goes, no man is an island. So in addition to nurturing democracy in country, we must continue to build on existing diplomatic, friendly, and brotherly relations to sustain development and consolidate peace with our immediate neighbors in the sub-region, the continent, and the world. Our viability as a nation depends on how well we entrench democracy, peace, and development into our everyday lives. Once again, I wish you all a happy 58th anniversary and pray for the continued peace, progress, and prosperity for all. I thank you.
We are progressing very well. Jali Mahmoudou, I know you're thinking it's taking too long and you want to perform. So I'll see what we do after this. Maybe we do 1 song, 2 songs, and then we conclude. 1 song? 1 song. Okay. So let's do 1 speech, then 1 song, then we can let you go. Right? The next speaker, I made him an imam, and he accepted. He's born in Kuntaya village in Jokadu district. He went to Armitage High School and he served in the former Gendarmerie. He continued in the military until he was honorably discharged. He went to further his education in the Gambia College School of Education, specializing in English and French. He went to Dakar University and then to France. Who would do French and not go to France? Mr. C worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs first as a protocol welfare officer and at the Gambian Embassy in France and then Chancellor. He would later become Gambian Ambassador to France, Taiwan, United States, and permanent representative to UNESCO. Currently, Essa Bokar C is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the OIC Secretariat, the Gambia, and he doubles as Security Coordinator. Mr. Essa Bokar C.
Assalamu alaikum. I will begin in the name of Allah, the creator of our observable universe and what is beyond that. Alhamdulillah. Let us begin by thanking everybody here. I will single out my Goro, because you mentioned my wife and he is here, Chief of Staff. So thank you, Goro, for sitting down and listening, for everybody here. Well, we are faced with a topic here that is universal. Let's begin by asking ourselves, what is democracy? Academically speaking, we can begin with the following facet from analytical minds. Education is key in molding a society, raising awareness and shaping the psyche of a given society. However, quality is always the best in anything, particularly in education. Educators who design syllabuses and curriculum are indeed the backbone of any sophisticated society, which is why we are taught most and always what must be revisited and refined to avoid pumping quantity, not quality, into the tanks of public service. It is where it all begins before talking about processes, policies, structures, and institutions. Most of those who graduated from our schools, we heard it before, the other speaker said it. I would quote my dear sister we once met at QTV. I always admire her, Kumba Dafe. She does a great job. She said something similar to what I'm saying now. What does our school system make our learners swallow, then keep repeating it like some sparrows singing in the atmosphere? Democracy means system of government for the people, by the people, for which people and by which people. That's my question. Here is where the X factor that connects and disconnects those people from the true meaning of democracy itself comes into the equation, which is why an African scholar injected this. And when this African scholar injecting this, I was there with my sister Salimata Toure, and that is the late Dr. Davidson Nichol. He said democracy means access to resources with dynamic redistributive policies. Well, other scholars have something to say. Democracy is a form of government in which the people have the authority to deliberate and decide legislation. Some call it direct democracy. You can go through the list. Direct democracy, democracy index, democracy ranking, economic democracy, empowered democracy. Well, let's escape. I use wow because I wanted us to come back to Gambia. Let's escape this threat, then reflect on the originality. The word democracy comes from where? They say from Greece. Well, Greece is in humanity. So for me, I want to say democracy is specifics for Greeks because they carved the word, but democracy is human, it's not Greek. So the Greek word demos meaning people and kratos meaning power. With all the above meanings tabulated herein, we will now refuse to be caged within the circles of intellectual gymnastics. But before I go, I want to tell Haruna that I have 4 pages and each of them is 2 minutes. So when I turn the 4th one, that's my 8-minute reminder. Let's simplify things, then see how best we can sow a grain without a worm into the psyche of society. A case study is so ripe in the Gambia. We as a nation are caught between a post-colonial and post-tyranny era while being propelled into the futuristic discovery. Well, brothers and sisters, fellow citizens, I can comfortably say that before going any further, the components of the combustion engine of governance and services should be this: A, constitution; B, institution; C, functionality; D, service; E, national duty; F, national interest. Well, there are signboards on the road, though. Most of us find it difficult to understand those signboards, to read them. They are responsibility and opportunity. These are signs we as people cannot still read properly. I am included. What are the binoculars to use when reading these signboards? Because our eyes cannot see them. Now let's use binoculars. First is for one to rise above self, where selflessness is to feed or guide patriotism. Here I will invoke this formula: HLH. Honesty, loyalty, honesty. Be honest to yourself. If you are honest to yourself, you will be honest to the president, you will be honest to the ministers, you will be honest to the citizens. If you are dishonest to yourself, even if you advise, you are dishonest to yourself, dishonest to them, dishonest to the citizens. As citizens, and to be more precise, as servants of the nation, we must distinguish the difference between what is opportunity and what is responsibility. Let us avoid the common saying, "Ndeyam moko ligay." No. Most of us cannot separate the two charged with the responsibility to serve one's nation. Our own culture is a processing plant of attitudes that are completely incompatible with the true meaning of democracy. I'm sorry, but I have to say. It is indeed where we are awed by that intrinsic value embedded in service delivery to learn the art of detachment from our usual comfort zones of emotions and desires to what should remain national and reasonable in the service to one's nation. Here I will come back to my old speeches. We claim to be 90% Muslim in the Gambia, don't we? We do. Where that is the case, we don't need to go any further to understand. And our brothers also have the same teachings, who are the Christians. We have lived with them. They have participated in building me. I will end my speech on that question that I was asked on Capitol Radio. Now, honesty, loyalty, honesty comes back. Now, if you are a Muslim and then you are asked to serve, you don't need to go to any school of thought to teach you what service means, what democracy means. Well, the Prophet Muhammad said, "Hubbul watan min al-iman." Loving yourself, loving your people, loving your nation is part of Iman. If you don't have Iman, you are not with God, you are not with Allah. Loving one's nation, or if you wish citizenry, is an integral part of faith. Prophet Muhammad came back. I'm speaking like this because Gambians claim to be 90% Muslim. He said, "Faman amila salihan falinafsihi." Anything good you do is for your soul. Okay? Anything good that you do is for your soul. Prophet Muhammad also taught us to be working so hard, so much that anyone who observes us may think that we want to live forever or we will never die. Prophet Muhammad said, he equally said that, let us worship Allah to a point where anybody who observes us thinks that we think we are going to die in the next 5 seconds. I don't know anybody else who can teach you responsibility more than Muhammad if you call yourself a Muslim. Well, if you go to the Christians, who can tell me who sacrificed more than my namesake, Isa alayhi salam? He stood against tyranny and he was crucified. That's what sacrifices, that's what democracy calls, and that's what responsibility calls. Nothing escapes Allah though. Well, those who know the verses, know. Nothing escapes him. So let's be very careful. Where one finds yourself surrounded by the above, you are compelled to remain honest to your soul and heart. Indeed, anyone who claims to be faithful to Allah within the reflective consciousness in his or her being should neither be corrupt nor serve your nation in a selfish way. One who lives by the above is equally obliged to remain tolerant within politics, ethnicity, and religion against all odds. Yet, should equally remain firm, just, impartial, and loyal to the flag, emblem, national anthem, national interest. Where all the above are combined, national duty will be free from deficiencies. Mark you, institutions without functionality are like cars without good engine. Functionality with excessive deficiencies leaves so much to be desired. On that note, that every citizen is expected to feed his or her soul with. But before I go, Haruna, I know, I like disobeying rules though. Sometimes when I was depot, they used to put me in jail. But let me disobey the rule and people will be happy. I had Mrs. Duffy mentioned this. I want to come back to this. The woman. Any country that does not honor women, you don't honor children, you don't honor the disabled, you will never go forward. That is the truth, and that is what is in the United States. Okay? So this is, I want to give one example. Kennedy said, what can you do for your country, not what your country can do for you. We talk about it. I did it. You can go to New Fella. I didn't make noise about it. I bought a place, 100 meters square, fenced it, called the woman. Today they are farming there, and only thing I told them is water those pear trees. They do it and pray for me, and I have not met them yet. I will do another village farm in Kutaya. Wallahi lazim. Let us do what we say, and that's it. Thank you.
As 4 of my panelists are done, I want to ask a question that you will think about for the Q&A when we come to it. Is there, let me start with you, Madam Nene. Is there any law that says our National Assembly members must speak in English? Think about it, when we come to the Q&A. And the same to you, Mr. Historian. Our first parliament, were we free to speak in Jola, Manjago, Sirir, Sarahule? If yes or no, let's get to that. Because honestly, for these messages to sink through, why don't we speak Wolof in National Assembly? Or Mandinka, or Fula? It's, I don't know, are we doing our country the service we need to? Sometimes some members struggle with English. And then I wonder, are the constituents getting it? I mean, if the member is struggling, how about the rest? You know, so maybe, Madam SG, that's, you know, let's think about it before we bring the Kora to serenade us in the words of Hausum Sise and we prepare the next panel. Mamoudou Suso.
nganyo bunya nganyo horoma imalo alu ngabata keloma mbete alu pata nani roma mbete ajali musali jali kali wo demokras Bakari Sidibe wali yati loke Gambia Bakari Sidibe binta kema akatapuri yata mawuli Sorwa Kasim Sisalati lole bekeri Fula mutaja awasini manjallo jeri Jali musoni jali kelu Fatimata Jallo Farayatale Doya julo wo bantale Farayatale Emgara Kelo mani sonko mani demkaras Kelo mani sonko mani demkaras Nganyo bunya nganyo kanu mandele Farayatale Daya dulo wo bantale farayatale Legi nak dafa am benn moto boo xam ne boobu mee la waaye boobu nag xale ñoo ko moom
Jali Alinso Fendin naka jalo kan dia Ala fo mole mamang Ale mamang nani ñi yengu ñu joxe lu ndaw ah gewel nak mom du mëna tega ken joxu ko dara de nañ yengatu way
dara me farsinga aha wallahi
Hey, Johnny Johnson koli janyun da Gambia Johnson. Kuli jame zo jame amusa. Sokonya ni angao. Na minisa kana ndeni yang. Hey. Ngakunun koke.
Nani yang fula.
Tamata ko ni mara ko kula nyang kumbolo dawda sonko kana mo kani. Siaga Muna malabi molula, wai anya nole ya tinna. Malabi molula, muna kama kuma jamba jamba
Mama Kalila Fatumata Jallo. Jallo ni nakite sidi beni sakari apula o Jallo jeri. Imalo Fatumata Jallo. Iti loke na iti loke ni me iti loke sidi misa. Jeli musuni kali kalu da fejao. Mbapole apula mutajaba sidi ma da fejao. Dikwa ni fanyame.
Suwalu sambajire
Wallahi.
Suwalu sambajire na sumun dunia la jari maudo sumun dali kiyama ali maje sada uda banta wali mandin golu surwani jolalu ani nganyo muta de mukarasi vele ani ngabata nyusi busimba samban sola dunia vele meba kini mfakini ani ngade nyola ani nganyode masara kululu na ta dunia vele ndani jolali ya janyunke ni ausan ko ya janyunke akuoli yenso fotuma ketuma mbetuma jontende duniati saya te jantulawo jomme la mawlo demokrasi ali ngakarasi demokrasi nata futi darabe sumayata muna futa boyta kansalade mallala jini babu la janna sane ma dawli mambete futa boyta kansala saminin tumanna berkolon kansala kelo wonde manhangi sane ma dawlinya wol mambete ala baraka
Jonken Defalalu. Thank you very much. We will continue now with the seriousness that brought us together here and spending the rest of the day here, probably, because we have 4 more panelists to go. But I think the conversations are very interesting. These are welcome discussions that we should have as a country. So for the second half of the senior panel, the first speaker, as they say in England and other places, ladies first, was a former member of the National Assembly for Lower Salem constituency, a magistrate at the judiciary of the Gambia, born in Kaur Wharf Town, attended Kaur Primary School, Armitage High School, and did cooperative training school and the University of the Gambia, a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, the very Honorable Ndeye Njai.
Good afternoon, everybody here present. I also stand on the protocols of previous speakers, and I'm still wondering whether I'm going to change my speech or not. Because it seems all that I was supposed to say is already been said. Anyway, I'll try my best and make a little difference. And then before I start my speech, I want to wish all and sundry here a very enjoyable 58th Independence Anniversary of the Gambia. My best wishes to all of you. In this topic, which is democracy as a recipe for peace and development, I think there's no better time to bring up this topic. As we in the Gambia just returned to democracy in 2016 after 22 years of a different thing. The monumental concept of democracy is being felt and exhibited by all Gambians since year 2016 in different ways. But all over the world, many countries are embracing democracy because of many benefits it has, especially within the realms of peace, development, and stability. We did not inherit an easy country as we are standing here today, and that is why we need to nurture the peace and this young democracy we have, as it is still in its infant and very fragile stage. Democracy is the prerequisite for the delivery of essential public goods, for the attainment of peace and security in all public spheres. Democracy in a context remains the bedrock of peace because with the availability, access, and affordability of elements highlighted above, democracy can support and guarantee the peace, stability, growth, and environment suitable for all. Just as we have been saying, our democracy is still young and we are still nurturing it, and we are seeing the misconceptions of democracy in the Gambia. And I think in as much as we want to go Democrat, we need to tell the youth what it's all about so that we avoid this misconception. It's important to note that to foster the structure of democracy, the system of a free press, unions, political parties, universities, which allows the people to choose their own way, to develop their own culture, to reconcile their own differences through peaceful means, is at the discretion of the people concerned. With peace and security, an enabling environment is established which citizens can all enjoy. Democracy in this context avails the opportunity of inclusivity, which is very important. There was a speaker who spoke before me that if we look at the physically challenged or differently able-bodied, most of us them would not have been able to access here. And in many other spheres where they are not represented, and they are part of us. So if we are claiming for democracy, and the differentially abled or physically challenged are not taking on board, I think we might need to go back to the drawing board to see how well we do it. That's why, due to the role that women play in the promotion of democracy, I cannot read a page without mentioning women and equality in any sphere of life, as I am a dead gender activist. Due to the role that women play in the promotion of democracy, we emphasize the need to promote tolerance, accept us wherever we are. Times are gone when we go to the Bantaba, we have a setup of how we should sit. The women would sit behind and say, "Lugor ni wax rek baxna. Kewale fi ko fen dorong fo abetiyatale." We are also good thinkers as the other part, as we form 51% of the population. So you promote that tolerance, respect, understanding, moderation, and religious freedom, which are essentials to the development of free and democratic society. And also take into account that respect for the dignity of all human beings is critical for promoting peace and prosperity. Looking at democracy as a system, it is envisaged to ensure that there are adequate provisions of basic services such as health. Not long ago, we have seen patients, not women alone, but patients being carried on donkey carts, ox carts, from remote villages to be taken to the nearest health centers, and so many things happen along the way. Access to goods and services, security, and we all know the state of security in which we are. A democratic state should be able to provide security for me and you and everybody else, so that when we lie down on our beds, we sleep peacefully and wake up peacefully, not thinking that somebody will break into our house, take our belongings, and in some cases, our lives as well. That's just to name a few. And it's worth to note that lack of democracy and development is a very good recipe and a fertile land for chaos and disorder. Thus, we'll encourage peaceful cohabitation and tolerance so that we feel that we are each other's keepers. Within the ideals of democracy, the values remains humanity, equality, and destiny, which is enshrined in our 1999 Constitution, in as much as we have been advocating for a new constitution, but we have some very good fundamental rights and freedoms enshrined in that constitution. And I think we're going to build more on it and develop it more. Our humanity being the total expression of all our universal values, such as truth, justice, freedom, equality, love and compassion, moderation, tolerance, and restraint, which lies at the heart of our traditions. That's the typical Gambian tradition. And Gambians, as Gambians, this is why realizing our humanity is discovering the divine essence in us. Furthermore, in democracy as a system of governance, women and their contributions to nation building are recognized in national constitutions. Although women are still lagging behind in terms of political participation, we just had a workshop sometime with IRI. No. Okay, let me rush. Okay, then I will jump on that, and here I will come. To this forum, I must confess, is the right and smart thing to do in this, time of independence. The organizers, I thank you all. I must to say bravo to all of you for being here. You distracted me anyway. I have to say.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I didn't say anything.
I'm very useful.
Okay. In conclusion, we have a situation that needs addressing for peace and development. The principle of inclusion in a democracy is very fundamental for economic growth at individual and national levels, as well as social justice. Social justice is paramount in any society. We have to work together as partners in peaceful coexistence for generations to come. We must recognize that Gambia needs all hands on deck, irrespective of political affiliation, irrespective of religion, irrespective of sex, age, and region. We all have a country to build, and that is the Gambia. I thank you all.
The next speaker is a Banjulian, is a Banjul boy. And he studied journalism at Stanford University in California and mass communications at Lewis and Clark College, Portland, Oregon, in the United States of America. He has years of experience editing newspapers, magazines, both at home and in London, England. He is the founding dean of the School of Journalism and Digital Media of the University of the Gambia. He's engaged in private media consulting and is the ghost writer for Kairaba, the autobiography of Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara, former president of the Gambia. He writes novels and short stories. He enjoys singing and dancing to jazz. I changed listening to dancing to jazz. Mr. Calabash, among many others, is an inspiration to us in the media fraternity. We know him well, and he's such a great personality, so it's an honor to call you, sir. 10 minutes still, sir.
And as a teacher, I always draw inspiration from God Almighty. And I say, oh, teach me, Lord, that I may teach the precious truths which you impart, and wing my words that they may reach the hidden depths of many a heart. And those words of Frances Havergal those words take me to asking the question, or making a point rather. At 58, no man is expected to have nannies spoon feed, dress up, or scold him for inattention to details of toiletry and other essential conduct. Which makes this gathering timely. That the Gambia is still, so that we find out that the Gambia is still not in bibs and diapers on governance and democracy. For that, we must do a pulse check. Pulse check of the executive, where we insist on merit versus nepotism and sectarian impulses, the judiciary, independent justice versus impunity, the legislature, democratic order versus the tyranny of the majority, the press, ethics versus concession, and the people, informed participation versus ignorance and compulsion. First of all, democracy demands a rejection of the stereotype of assuming that society begins and ends with the executive, as is the traditional tendency to worship office. In fact, the people stand out as the main ingredient for democracy, or in democracy. Therefore, I am going to concentrate my 10 minutes on the citizen. And so it is service to the people that justifies their preeminence, that has them electing their governors, that is the executive, and the Curia Gambiana, that is the parliament, including all other assets that fall under the civil law and administration. Therefore, it is crucial that the people understand the machinery that governs them. Otherwise, people power, which is the actual translation of democracy, people power, will surrender ownership and compromise its authority over the nurturing of the relationship with the establishment that must energize democracy. Henry Lord Brougham in London of 1828 sealed the quality of people that must come to that table. He said, "Education makes a people easy to lead, but difficult to drive. Easy to govern, but impossible to enslave. Consider all the dangers of the reverse, where the people are uneducated, uninformed, and illiterate, and stuck in myth and superstition, especially with a mentality that is so easy to enslave. Why do you think the first rule during the enslavement of our ancestry in the Americas was that the slave must never be taught to read or write? Because the enslavers knew that knowledge was the first ingredient in the uprising for freedom. The people of the Gambia are not slaves, but the lack of education that compromises their power of decision would be tantamount to spiritual darkness that can lend essentially to a systemic bondage exploitable by tyrannically undemocratic politics. Once in the life of the Gambia, a citizen, underline, citizen, Edward Francis Small, epitomized the struggle of the common man against the inaction in the face of colonial dictation. So, he began charting our nation's freedom story as early as 1917. A highly educated townsman, a minority Creole Christian, he used language that spoke of the Gambia as a project, not as that which of tribe or tongue constituted the peasantry, or what gains accrued to him in office as a leader and a spokesman for the people. When we say leader here, we also mean parent, teacher, priest, manager, director, or politician. Edward Francis Small was not alone. Many patriots followed his lead. Keba Walimbai, Momodou Jahumpa, Charles Whitfield Downs Thomas, Richard Shokele Rendell, John W. Kuye, in making the people a priority in his Gambia project. And in that Gambia project, the concentration was awareness, that is education and press information, organization for the bargaining power through trade unions, political participation for parliamentary representation promotional of a forceful civic drive towards orderly and dignified self-governance. It was a groundbreaking achievement when in 1947, Gambians for the first time were able to vote to elect their own to sit in the Gambia Legislative Council, essentially our National Assembly today. That breakthrough led to an unstoppable awakening. Political parties formed and leaders were emergent to contest and struggle in politics that led to the election appointment of a Gambian cabinet under a premier in 1962. It was from that powerhouse that representatives went to Marlborough House, London, in October 1964, where two most worthy citizens, David Kwesi Jawara and Sheriff Sekuba Sise, appended their signatures to the Gambia Independence Agreement that stated that the Gambia would become a sovereign nation upon its attainment of independence from Great Britain on February 18th, 1965. And here we are, celebrating in fitting manner 58 years of that already. 2 minutes. I will use that 2 minutes to consolidate that in that democracy, we teach democracy as a culture, living by it and deciding on appointments on merit and growing respectful relationships and by adhering to law and order. To avoid preaching division by religion or tribe or caste. We punish evil and we reward excellence. We praise our heroes and make loud testimony of our best and brightest. And if I may jump to the conclusion, which I said I did complain, that I was not so bad at précis writing at St. Augustine's and Gambia High School. But to précis 58 years in 10 minutes, I think it's torture. And these people have been guilty of torture. And, but I take it with bravery, right? So therefore, the Gambia must have a clear picture of every citizen, male, female, old and young. Otherwise, the consequence of any distortion makes room for the tempting gluttony of self-interest that feeds only one part of the body and not the whole. So the citizen has that body. Impunity and patronage might help us to live if we realize that we have betrayed our oath in office. But forget about the status. Let us look at each other. Look at ourselves as first the citizen before the holder of the office. And then we will understand our duty to people's power. And then that will help us. At 58, our country must insist on people and leaders that come from the citizenry with a clear vision of a nation against the conspiracy of self or segment. Those who we, the people, bring into office then become the foremost pillars for a functioning democracy, lasting peace, sustainable development, and true independence. I thank you for this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you.
And it was great, it was great. I am glad we are teaching the young people. I'm glad, really, that our teachers are coming for you. Our teachers are coming. So the next speaker, Dr. Cherno Omar Bari, is the Vice Chancellor and President of the International Open University. He served as Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, also at the Ministry of Health and Social Welfare, at the Ministry of Youth and Sports, Ministry of Defense, at the Office of the President. Okay. He also BA in English from St. Mary's University in Halifax, Canada, an MA in, and McPhil and PhD in Comparative Literature from the University of Limoges. You know, when you speak French, you have to be a bourgeois. You have to learn to do Limoges in France. Limoges. Cherno is an associate professor of comparative literature, and he taught for 8 years at the University of the Gambia before joining the National Commission for UNESCO. He later served for 2 years at the as the Gambian representative to UNESCO in Paris, France, before he was appointed and promoted as Permanent Secretary, 1, Office of the President. Dr. Barry is an accomplished academic, literary critic, editor, and researcher. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Cherno Omar Barry.
Mi fuɗɗorto yewtude pulaar mi salmina hellifaɓe juuɗiɓe ɗo ɓen fof mi fuɗɗora nene an Hajja Fatoumata, former vice president, ministre ɓen permanent secretary ɓe wonɓe ɗo ɓen, directors ɓe ɓen fof e sukaɓe ɓen kadi mi weltori ami Sissoko waɗɗolan invite mi ari mi jooɗi ɗo. I think I'm reiterating a point that it will be good to communicate to the much larger public. Well, all protocols duly observed. I'm much delighted to join the panel, and I was wondering why we were the last panel. And I looked at us and I saw doctors and professors and all that. I said, okay, everybody would disappear before we come, certainly, because we are going to be the talkative guys. Well, I have to also confess, I was very impressed, very impressed. Nana and myself, you know, said this when the youth panel came. I'm not sure whether they were all youth though, but I'm sure they represented. I said I could also have been part of the youth panel, you never know, you know. But they made an excellent start to this discussion. In fact, I was really, really impressed. I think what we pick from what has been said so far is that democracy is very difficult to define. You know, I mean, yes, at primary school we said it's the government of the people, by the people, of the people. But if you look at a lot of what has been said, even at the UN level, what they will tell you is that democracy is practiced in many ways, and none of them is perfect. So it doesn't have any particular meaning. And that's going to be the point of my argument. If it doesn't have any particular meaning, it means then you can domesticate democracy. You can adapt democracy. You can make democracy your own. So democracy should not be imposed on you by anything. Yes, there are what we call basic human rights. There are basic universal rights, yes. But beyond all that also, there are what we call the values that are enshrined in a people. So it's a people that define how they live. And that is why we have our history. Hassan is gone, but if you look at what we have been saying before, our history has taught us that there were a lot of other leaders who were here. Excellent leaders. Yes, we have had our own normal disruptions. We had the Musa Molos, we have the Fode Kabadumbuyas, we have the Mama Tamba Jamme, whose book has been written very recently. We have people who have been leading us and building a culture of respect, of order, of social communion amongst all the societies, of tolerance, of living together in such a beautiful way that people prospered, business prospered, people lived well, they ate well, they worked all the time. Yes, certainly in every form of political structure, there are its buts, its negatives. But we were striving, we were living in our own ways. And then we had the whole disruption by the definition of borders that were not of our own, and eventually we were now clustered into countries that we never created. And then we were forced to start accepting a democracy I'm sure most of us don't even understand. So that's where it begins. So what does it mean? It means we have to reflect again, deep amongst ourselves, how do we now adapt democracy in the context in which we are? We cannot change it. We cannot go back to those empires and kingdoms that we had before. We cannot go back to the Fuladu Empire that was thriving in the Gambia. We cannot go back to the Nyomi Empire, to the Kombo Empire that we are thriving. They have been here and working well, you know, with kings who have been taking care of their people. So it means because we are now Gambia, we are now one people, we have to rethink that democracy. We cannot just borrow it somewhere else and then push it onto our people. So if they say democracy is a government by the people, then we should define which people. What democracy? For which people? That's important. But you see, when we talk about democracy, the first thing that comes to mind mostly is security. And I'm happy that the Minister of Interior, the security advisors are around. You see, providing security to a local community, because the local community are the people that are governed, is an indispensable element to nurturing peace. First thing that is important is security. Somebody said that yes, democracy is also the definition of lack of hunger. I mean, if you get food, then you're happy. But you see, that perception is also wrong. Because if you are in a peaceful environment, certainly you can thrive. You are not expected to get hungry, because then there is a possibility of doing business. People are not afraid to go to their farms. They are not afraid to do business. They are not afraid to travel around. You know, and that is why then eventually you might be able to, how they call it, be able to conquer hunger and a host of other things. But then the second part that is important is also involving civil society. Civil society, here the definition has also been given from another perspective. But from our own perspective, let's look at civil society from our own cultural setups. Somebody mentioned about Bandaba or Pench. You know, from the beginning of our societies, people have always had a way of ensuring that discussions are nurtured. If you go to a village, there's always a way to resolve conflicts. There's a way of ensuring that marriages are are done. When people die, how to take care of them. When I'm teaching a course called African Literature, and something very interesting used to come up there. Because we have to discuss pre-colonialism, colonialism, and post-colonialism. So then I asked them, I said, why is it that I'm asking and all of the students, if today you have a jar and a potindal, a cup on top of that jar, and you're asked to drink from it, will you? They said no. I said, why? Because they said they have understood that potindal will carry germs. Because anybody else will come from everywhere and then drink from the potindal. I said, how many of you drank from that potindal all your childhood days? And they raised their hands. I said, have you got sick? Were you thinking that you will get sick when you drink from that potindal? They all kept quiet, because that's a consciousness that you already have. That when you drink from the potindal, you will get sick. Most of us drank from that potindal. Yes, we might have got sick, but we could never have associated the potindal to the sickness. That means the moment you are conscious of certain things, naturally you react to that consciousness. And that also means the type of education you have will eventually define the kind of people you will become. That's why education is an indispensable element in building a people. So the key words that are important, as I said, is what democracy for what people. Now let me focus on the people. And here it will go, we always say government, but government are duty bearers. They are given responsibilities. But we also have the right holders, that are the people. They also have their rights, and they require their rights. So the basic rights will require that they get education. But let's look at our context. What is our context? Our context above everything else today is it people that are seen to be religious. That is the first thing you notice. When you get into town, I mean, even somebody was looking at me and said, I told you I'm a sheikh. I said, why? Because I'm wearing these beautiful clothes and I have a beard on? And why am I supposed to be made a sheikh because I have a beard? But I don't have to be a sheikh. I love the way I am attired. And I'm sure many of us love to do the same. So if religion becomes one of the most important elements in our lives, why don't we use religion then to create the peace and development that we need? Why don't we use religion then to create the tolerance and respect for each other? Because there is absolutely no religion that promotes intolerance. So therefore, tolerance, generosity, truthfulness is all inbuilt in our deen. It means therefore we should now rethink of educating our people to better understand their religion. We might be getting a better people. The second thing is we have to know where we come from. We cannot continue to forget our history. We are, as a people, some of us don't even know our history. But part of our history is our language. And I will tell you this, language is the vehicle of culture. I started with my fuller language. But let me tell you, how did the French, were able to now, up till today, have a grasp of their colonies. They started with teaching their language because they said, la langue c'est le véhicule de l'assimilation. The only way they can assimilate a people is by teaching them the language, and by teaching them the language, they will teach you that the three most important elements for the French culture is la baguette, le fromage, and le vin. SG is laughing, he knows. we've all studied in France, and I'm sorry, former Vice President too notes. But what it means is you cannot learn the language without learning the culture. And now, why don't we therefore learn our language? Why don't we now learn our language to better understand our culture? Up till now, we don't have a language policy. So it's important that we reflect on what we need to educate our people, to prepare them to be better people, to better understand things. And then the values and our virtues are all inbuilt in that language. Therefore, by teaching the language, by teaching the culture, those values are promoted, and people now get to respect their elders. They get to respect authority. They get to know how to address authority. They get to appreciate what they have and also know how to deal with problems that they face within a society. I'm sorry, but that's where I'm asked to stop. The last thing is cultural diversity, and that is also inbuilt in that cultural way. We are a community of people. We are not individual people. That is why we eat around a big bowl, everybody taking its own share until the bowl is empty. Let us value where we come from and our cultures, and certainly we'll get a better people. Thank you.
Now that we are talking about culture, and the language I understand the most, unfortunately, is Mandinka. Liro Sita Tongola. The last speaker for this panel, and I hope he will keep to the 10 minutes, promise? Aha. Professor Abdoulaye Sen is Professor Emeritus of Miami University, Oxford, Ohio, where in 2014 he was named University Distinguished Scholar. He is the author, editor, co-editor of 5 books and over 35 peer-reviewed academic journal articles, reports, and reviews. For several years, he served as department chair and the director of the program in diplomacy and global politics in the Department of Political Science at Miami University. Before pursuing higher education in the USA and Canada, Professor Sen trained as a teacher and taught at the Kerawan and Crab Island Junior Secondary Schools in the early 1970s. Today, his former students in the Gambia and USA occupy important positions in the professions, in government, and in academia. Professor Sen, in 2022, helped set up the Suleiman S. Nyang and Lamin O. Sane Institute for Social Research and Justice, and serves as its executive director. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Abdoulaye Sen.
Good afternoon. Are you all tired? It is truly a pleasure to be here. And I stand on all existing protocols to recognize all the dignitaries that are here, including my sister, the former Vice President, SG, and many others, the ministers and the religious leaders as well. And I would be remiss if I also didn't recognize Jaina Banyan, who is indeed a major veteran of the media fraternity. So on behalf of the Suleiman Nyang and Lamin Sane Institute for Social Research and Justice, I wish to thank the Office of the Vice President, and in particular, Ami, for this very kind invitation. And it is one that I truly cherish. Today's topic should be taken as a thesis. It should be taken as a proposition. At least it should be taken as a question. There appears to be unanimity or agreement that democracy and peace ultimately could lead to development. What I'm suggesting is that there appears to be some, but not universal, empirical evidence to support such a thesis. I propose, therefore, that the linkage or the link between democracy, peace, and development is rather weak. And the arguments that go to support it, for the most part, are even weaker. What I propose to do in this 10 minutes, too bad I don't have an hour, is to be disruptive, is to problematize the very issue of this linkage. And in doing so, unpack for you briefly the underlying assumptions and ideology that underpin the drive and the conception that democracy and peace could ultimately lead to development. What I'm suggesting ultimately is, this is very ideological, coming from the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and then there was triumphalism, especially in American media and academy, that capitalism had finally won. Democracy then became the mantra. It became the catchphrase that was spread throughout the world as a means of bringing about so-called development in the rest of the world. I have difficulty, in other words, with the very notion of democracy and development itself. These are very loaded words. So really what I'm suggesting is we need to sit back and reflect on the terms we use, we appropriate from another source. Do these serve our fundamental interests? I am saying that knowledge and power are intimately interconnected. And American hegemony, French hegemony, and most imperial powers, as my friend Chairman has said, have used language as ideology to dominate and at the same time exploit. Ultimately, what I'm suggesting is that we must be very cautious and indeed be thoughtful in the kinds of language, in the kinds of paradigms we appropriate from hegemonic powers. Because really it is intended not so much for our own purposes, to develop us, but to control, manipulate, and exploit. This is perhaps not what you expected from me. Everybody seems to be agreed that democracy, peace, and so forth and so on ultimately lead to development. And I'm saying it doesn't. There are fundamental issues that mediate the transition from democracy to development. And a lot of us have talked about it by way of institutions, leadership, constitution, and so forth and so on. In the absence of that, then the linkage becomes all the more tenuous. What I'm suggesting is, it is not a given. Democracy is not a panacea. Democracy is a vehicle that could potentially lead to, that could potentially lead to better outcomes. But really, there are countries that are not democracies that have done extremely well by way of development. And some democracies have failed miserably when it comes to questions of peace. So again, when we talk about peace, it is as nebulous a term as democracy and development. We talk about positive peace, but there's also negative peace. And there's also structural violence that comes out of negative peace. And this is something we need to address in this country and throughout the world. In countries that claim to be democracies, to give you an example, the United States is a great country, strong institutions, great leadership. But according to the Democracy or Peace Index, the United States ranks 129 out of 163 countries when it comes to peace and development. What I am ultimately saying is that we need to interrogate what we accept, the models of development we accept from the outside. We are too quick, much too happy to jump into the bandwagon without critically analyzing what this bandwagon serves. For the most part, it does not serve our interests. This whole notion of development is a facade, I'm sorry to say. It does not serve the interests of the underprivileged. It serves the interests of the privileged and the powerful. And knowledge, as a consequence, becomes a tool in their hands to subjugate and at the same time dominate. And that is why ideology becomes so insidious. Most of us have really bought into that ideology of development peace or democracy, peace, and development. Development has been going on for the last 50 or 75 years. But only a few people have benefited, or countries have benefited from this industry. What I'm suggesting, therefore, in conclusion, is that we need to problematize, to interrogate, and to challenge this theory known as democratic peace theory. It has been poo-pooed by academics, for the most part. The underlying assumption is that when there is democracy, there is peace. Democracies don't fight wars against one another. Now, this was very rampant during the Cold War, or after the Cold War. But it is democracies, mature democracies, that invade countries. It is mature countries that also really violate the human rights of their own citizens. So really what I'm suggesting at the end of the day, I don't believe that there is a linkage, either empirically or theoretically, between those three. If anything, it is ideology. Thank you.
We're ending on a high note, and that's very good. So, what do we want to do? It is also, I'm aware that the security sector reform event is going to take place here. So, media people stay put. After us, that just continues right after. So, we don't have to change halls. It's quicker to do it that way. So, it has been a long day. Shall we agree on 5 questions? Yes, no, maybe? I'm just thinking we can do this quickly and get out of here. 5? Maybe 5. Okay, so can we have the senior panel back again? You four remain, and then we'll have the rest come join us. No, not chairs. Don't worry. Not chairs. We'll do that. We'll do that. We'll fix it. There's one chair there, there's one here, and we need only one more. There's one there. So we will have a couple of questions. The rules are, please let's be within a minute. Sir, I am aware, but I'm allowed to give you 1 minute. I am allowed to give you 1 minute. I play by the rules. I'm just the jelly bar. They give me rules. I play by the rules. 1 minute? If you agree, we'll start with you. Okay, let's have the questions first. Questions, anyone? Okay, let's start with you. Where's the other mic? Oh, okay, thank you. You can direct it to any one of them directly.
Dr. said it's actually very interesting that you refer to democracy as the industry. Very fascinating. But what I want you to do is broaden your definition of negative peace, just a little bit.
Professor Sen, 1 minute.
Thank you.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Aji Kumar. You know, in the literature in political science and global politics, there is a very rich literature that addresses all these key concepts, including peace. Peace is not necessarily the absence of war, somebody said earlier. And as much as there is positive peace, when things are going well, you know, democracy is working and so forth and so on, underlying that is negative peace. Negative peace meaning structural violence, government policy or lack thereof, societal orientations, be it on gender, be it on questions of religion, differently disabled, people who are on the margins of society, who for the most part cannot access the benefits. They die slowly. They die slowly out of neglect because the policies in place have not addressed their fundamental needs. In some, structural violence is prevalent. And the Gambia, I don't want to go that far, but the Gambia's peace is predicated on, to a large extent, on negative peace. The suppression of women, religious minorities, intolerance, and so forth and so on. And that leaves or makes the whole dispensation very fragile, to say the least. So in some, structural violence is a concept that's been talked about for a long time in response to the euphoria that has greeted the notion of positive peace.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand up there. You can direct a question to anyone.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fabakari Kale, representing Gambia Civil Aviation Authority, airport manager. Maybe first I want to say there's a little link between democracy.
You can have your own reflection in a minute if you want.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't have to be a question.
There's a little link between democracy and peace. Otherwise, nobody will build a modern structure in Kiang and you call it headquarters.
And Kiang of all places.
Exactly. So
yes.
There's a little, they're now having a little peace. In fact, where's our resources on that airport they go in Kiang, right? So at least democracy brought those
You
things.
are going there.
Exactly, sir. But there are things that I want the panel to look at. In our process, in our, efforts to keep democracy in this country, where did we go wrong? How has democracy brought about known peaceful situations in our country, and how do we address them? I would like, us to think over that.
What do you want to respond to that?
Many of them. I'll send it one by one. Maybe just 3 questions.
You're going to do the Fatim style. I refuse.
No, not
one question, one person. Direct it.
Okay.
One question, one person.
No, because in 2006, I was in Bakadaji on voter education on behalf of the peace ambassadors, and an old woman asked me, when will this independence end? And I want to send that to Honorable Gray Johnson. When will the independence end? So that when the independence ends, we can have peace. Because that was her assertion. Her belief at the time was, before the independence, there was peace. It was the people who came over to them, offered them a promise of peace after independence. Talk to them about very good things, and later they start insulting each other's mother. And later they start not eating from each other's house. And later they start being in different color of things.
He gets the drift.
In her view, when independence ends, then they will have peace, and the Gambia will have peace. So when will the independence end? And if you so wish, we ask the question, can we speak in a local language at the National Assembly? Dr. Barry started talking about it.
No, we did ask that.
Yes, we asked about it. Dr. Barry asked about it. But if we should, what language?
No, you came late.
Did we identify? I'm not late, sir. Mr. Aruna.
No.
Let me make just
No, what I mean is that question was already there before you arrived.
Yeah, I'm doing
so they'll address it.
I'm doing a little reflection, sir.
Okay, reflect. You
what
you had more than a minute, and
in
that's my worry.
Years, okay, in 58 years, what language can we point to as the national language of the Gambia? In 58 years, what can we point to as the Gambia? This is us. If you go out on forums, you have Plan National for Senegal, you have every country have their national this they can present.
We have our NDP.
What can we present as the Gambia? And that question I want to send to Dr. C.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye. There is no Dr. C here. Dr. Sen?
No, Babakar C. Mr. C.
Okay.
I don't know, why are you controlling me?
Wait, that's my job. That's my job. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Well, it's a very difficult question you asked, because the person who asked the question, when will independence end, has a kind of a thwarted concept of independence. Because I think it should have been your role as an ambassador for peace, as you said you went on this mission, to explain to the lady that she might have taken off from a wrong premise about the conceptuality of independence. And then you would have said, if independence is an achievement, a state in development, a state in political growth, then the question should be asked, what have we done with independence, rather than when it will end? Because it seems as if that question has become very popular over the years. When do we go back to colonialism? Because the concept is that we have failed. But have we failed? Have we failed? But what we are trying to do as far as peace is concerned is to know the kind of generic peace we are talking about. That is not necessarily, we Gambians are not stabbing each other in the street and killing each other, but are we safe with each other? And if we look at what is going on, which I refer to as the tyranny of the majority, hate speech, we might as well be at war. Because, take minorities for example. Minorities are worried in this country. They sleep with one eye open. Because when you listen to community radio, and you wonder whether what you are hearing is coming from the mouth of religious people. It is a definite division. I live in a neighborhood, and whereas it was the old Banjul neighborhood of I belong to you, you belong to me, we are each other's keeper, all of a sudden, 80s, 90s, somebody tells my children, I cannot come to your house. My father says I cannot come to your house to eat because I will eat something that is cooked in a pot that had cooked pork before. And that was the last time that child came to my house. I proposed to my wife to go and address the parent, the father who told the child that. They've been growing up with my children. But my wife said, no, just keep the peace. That's the peace we are talking about. That's tenuous peace. That's not peace. But we are not fighting.
Thank you.
But a parent told my son's friend, don't go there, don't eat there, because those bowls and pots might have cooked pork. That's serious disruption. And we take it for granted.
Thank you. Mr. C?
Thank you very much, sir. Your question is reflecting on the usage of language. Quote unquote, I think before we continue, we may as well agree to have usable language. Then we leap from there to national language, because my friend here would agree with me that linguistics says a language has 4 wheels to be complete. L'habilité de lire, d'écouter, écrire, et aussi. Huh? Donc that's it. That's French. Because you mentioned Senegal.
You see the French people?
So now the ability to read, write, listen, speak. See, we have those paradigms to go over. Amadou Hampâté Bâ tried his best along those lines. It goes with research. We have one person in this country who could be very helpful because that's his specialization, and that is Honorable Sidi Ejat. If you would not mind, we can organize a meeting, you and I, and then we can face him for lectures, so that I will sit near you and be a student too. But definitely it's a good question you're asking. Senegal, they have langue nationale, but that langue nationale, I think the scholars here would agree with me, it's more of form than substance. But when you want to build a national language or to structure it, I think it goes beyond politics. It is more than that. A lot of variables have to be associated. So thank you for the question. I hope I did try. Thank you.
You did try indeed. But Madam SG, we'll come to you for the same question because we said think about it. And then we'll go to Ms. Jam for the legal. Is there any legal reasoning behind the National Assembly having to speak in English that we could probably do in Mandinka or Manjago or any language actually?
Thank you, MC, for that question. I believe this is a relic from colonial days. And if you look at our constitution, section 89 states that, when you talk about qualification for National Assembly position, one of the requirements is you have to be able to speak English. So this has been going on. And unfortunately, we have some of our locals, people who struggle in the language, as you said earlier. And the possibility to be able to speak in our local languages should have been thought about long ago. Well, now fast forward again, 2020, we as the Constitutional Review Commission had realized this, and going around doing consultations with the public, they've been asking that national languages be spoken in the National Assembly. And because of that, we tried to include that in the draft constitution. I think it's section 15 something. I can't remember the
15 something is
15 something.
15 something.
Yes, 157. I got it.
157.
1571. That's the and 1572. So basically, hopefully, if the constitution gets adopted, we might be seeing local languages being spoken in the National Assembly. One thing, though, I noticed with the gentleman, he's asking whether there should be one local language.
One national language.
One national language. And that would be difficult because we are a diverse group of people. So what would be advisable is for anybody to speak in his own language and then have it translated so that those listening in the provinces or wherever you may be in front of your TV sets, you'll be able to understand what the speaker is talking about. Thank you very much.
Yes, we are diverse, Ms. Jam. Yes, we are diverse, but we are not any more diverse than Senegal, for example, or Kenya. And they have Swahili, Senegal have the Wolof. I don't think it's diversity itself. I think it's more the complexity of who we are as a people. But by law, is there anything stopping us, me speaking my Sarahule in the country's house?
Yes, Haruna. Right now there is. Section 105 of the Constitution. I have it pulled up here. It says the business of the National Assembly shall be conducted in the English language. or any other language prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. So I'm glad that the SG has reminded us that there's a provision, there was, well, in the current draft constitution. So there are two options now. We go ahead with and adopt the provision in the draft, or another act of the National Assembly would cure the problem, basically. Just another law saying that such and such language is acceptable to be spoken as a language in the National Assembly. And I recall a few years ago, I think, when the idea, started getting thingy, because people were like, okay, why not? The majority of the country perhaps don't understand the proceedings. They're technical enough in English language, referring to laws. I mean, it's bad enough, but you can't even understand if you don't speak English. So I asked my dad, and he explained to me how Senegal did this. And I believe the very first National Assembly member who spoke Wolof was Aji Aram Jane. I could be corrected here. And that was many years ago. And how many years ago Gambia were still in that same situation? I think we should have caught up perhaps, but better late than never. I think it could be cured by just another act of the National Assembly, or we just wait and adopt it. It's not controversial. You're not talking about people who are not literate in English at all. That question doesn't arise. It's just being able to speak the language that the most people understand. Because if you get somebody who is not literate in English, then it gets more and more complicated, because the documents, the laws, and everything are written in English. But to be able to speak the language, I think that's not controversial at all. And I think it should happen as soon as possible.
Okay, we'll take 2 or 3 questions maximum, then we come to you. No, we'll close with you, sir. You are here. Mr. Ja?
Thank you very much. Mine, it's not a question. It's more of an opinion based on a suggestion or a proposal. I might not have the opportunity to say it or to ask in gatherings such as this. I first of all want to express my appreciation for those who organized this, Office of the President. It's a very important day today. And what I am proposing is this should happen every year. Let's make it a date that every year, the 16th, we must have a public forum. We face challenges as a country, and I have to salute everybody that is here. Out of busy schedules, we're all here. Not that we have time, but we created time. To talk about our country, we cannot do it in hours. We should spend the whole day here because we have challenges. And Gambia is so dear to us as Gambians that there's nothing more important than this gathering right now. So I'll have to commend ministers and all the dignitaries that are here for having leave their job. They're here with us listening. And this should be a takeaway for those with responsibilities. From the President, His Excellency, President Adama Barrow, he has representatives here. It's not for them to tell us what they're doing, but to listen to Gambians, what Gambians want, so that we can build the country that we yearn for. 58 years, it's definitely a very long way. But like it is said locally, Kohamud Fojem, Gatelo Fingajoge. So we need the elderly to tell us what happened yesterday. We're talking about independence. Are we really independent? What do we really need as a country? So it should be a forum to give us the opportunity, not a minute or two, but for us to pour out our hearts, what we want for this country. They have to listen, and it will be a takeaway to help them do the needful in order for this country to progress. So maybe to plan for next year, they have to start tomorrow to work on the next year, on the 16th, when we'll all converge for this public forum. And for the team, I believe it doesn't have to change. Every country needs democracy. Democracy becomes meaningless when there's no peace. And in the absence of peace, we cannot have development. This could continue. We'll never exhaust these topics. So it's a proposal that this should be very important, that this hall needs to be filled until people are outside, because we're talking about Gambia. But now where are Gambians? Do we really value our country? So this needs to be publicized. We sensitize the people. We should converge and talk about the challenges of our country so that we can move ahead. I am Dudija. Did not wear any political hat today, but I come to represent the Kiskis Show. Thank you.
Thank you. So here. Thank you, Dudu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator, panelists, and the members, distinguished members in this room. I really thank the Office of the President for opening a door that has been locked for many years and is needed, more so after 22 years of the challenges, political, economic, and social challenges we had in this country. So the key now that I would like us to live with is to institutionalize social dialogue. No matter what, if it is ideology, democracy, as my brother says, democracy, peace, and development, if there are ideologies, in opening the door, we need to sit as Gambians and define the type of Gambia we want. Very important. Institutionalizing social dialogue means we have to be talking to each other and moving the country forward. Finally, democracy, or whatever we call it, is withering. And we cannot define democracy within just Gambia. Looking geographically, our location, looking at what is happening in the sub-region, Burkina Faso, the Sahel is burning, West Africa, everywhere, political crisis, conflicts, and so forth. So I would recommend that we expand whatever definition or whatever Gambia we want to make. We should define it within not only the context of the Gambia, but taking the ramifications of our location, our humanity, and all the rest. Finally, I'm very happy that you have gender balance. That's my passion. The day I will leave Gambia and go to my grave, the satisfaction that would make me...
Your grave will be in Gambia.
Yeah.
Your grave will still be in Gambia, don't worry. We guarantee that.
Exactly. The satisfaction that will give me peace and rest in my grave is when we can talk about a quota system where we can have what can lead us and inform us and guide us in having gender parity. But again, government has a challenge. We as people have a challenge. You have a lot of academics, you have a lot of social scientists, you have a lot of competent people in the country as women, but women shy away from politics. And if you shy away from politics, where these decisions are made, it's difficult to have representation. So it means that critically, we also, as women, we have to rethink. Young women have to rethink, elderly have to rethink. And the words of wisdom, young people, now they say it's the generation of the young. You cannot go without the elders. The elders is where the books are not written, but that is what you call wisdom. And taking it from the religious point of view, God himself has said in the Holy Quran, he said knowledge without wisdom is zero. That's why he has said, Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. He said, Allahumma rabbi zidni ilman fahaman wa karamatan fil salihin. Knowledge and wisdom. And it is the elders that have the wisdom. So let's put young and old, elderly and young together.
Okay. We'll go to Max, then we'll go there. We'll come back to you for the finale, and then we'll try to close. The SSR folks are ready for us. You wanted to respond? Okay, here. The mic is there.
I was just going to assure Madam that with what I saw this morning in the youth panel, we are encouraged. We are getting there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
All protests.
Just a point of clarification to Your Excellency, former Vice President, that women are shying away from politics, but we really are not. Whenever there are elections, if it comes to parliamentary elections and local government, there are flurries of applications from women. But then the issue is what you and I know, what she and she know is not what is on the ground. Politics.
What is on the ground?
What is on the ground?
That's what we want to know.
Yeah, I'll tell you. What's on the ground is if you are a woman, you are screened under the microscope and you have to be 10 steps ahead of a man before you are selected. An example, when I was contesting,
how do we break
there
that?
was a female who applied, and she was turned down on the basis that she had a child out of wedlock. There was another man in my own batch who applied and had the same.
And also had a child out of wedlock, but nobody said it.
The man was able to cross the bridge, but the woman was dropped. And then at the selection committees also, you only have males. You only have male mobilizers as the highest portfolio in the executives of the political parties. You understand? So there you don't have enough women's representative. And then
how do we break that, ma? How do we make sure it doesn't happen? I mean, that's why we're here.
Yeah, okay. Sure. Let there be a legislation whereby political parties will be bound to select based on equal representation of both men and women.
50-50?
50-50 at party level.
50-50, okay.
Even the UN is talking of 30-70, but that's too much. A gap, that's 20% gap. If we can have 50-50, because it's happening in Senegal, why not in the Gambia? Senegal are already through. They are already almost gender balanced now. They have the parity in their party.
You see, we were talking about teachers, we forgot you politicians.
Executives. They also have the parity in the executives and almost in the parliament as well. Lists were dropped for political parties because...
So political parties present and listening and watching.
Number one,
let democracy start within the local parties themselves.
Number one,
then we'll export it to the national level. That's what you're saying, if I hear you.
Oh yes,
every political party
that will bind political parties to select on 50-50 basis for the
and then we export it to the national level.
Oh yes.
Okay.
I fully agree that this conversation should not be just few hours. It should have been a retreat. I recommend that next year, Ami Bojang, my sister.
She's there in the corner.
Ami Bojang, my sister. Please tell His Excellency that I'm recommending that we have a retreat, or at least 2 days or 3 days, just to discuss the substantive
Maybe we have a whole day for young people. Then we have a whole day for the other. Instead of
excuse me.
Or together.
Intergeneration.
Okay.
No discrimination.
No.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Intergenerational dialogue. Everybody should be in the same place.
Okay.
To listen to each other, we learn from them and they learn from us. That's number one. But as a point of clarification, my sister, the quota system will address that because it becomes legally binding constitutionally that there must be internal democracy. And because what we have forgotten, the change that came after 22 years, was it the men? It was the young women, the elderly, the youth that brought about the change. We must not forget ndal biñu mayon ñu naan buñ ko toj. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to you quickly, then we'll come to SG. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. My name is Makaire Bajan. Actually, practicing insurance person. I want to throw this to Professor Sen. What is the true identity of a Gambian then? What were the core values of a Gambian? Where do we stand today as far as that is? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Prof, from you, we'll go to him and then close, inshallah.
Thank you, Mr. Bajan. I think that's a very good question. And I think I can respond to that question because I come from a generation that lived in rural Gambia, where good neighborliness was very important. Respect for the elderly was crucial. Among other things, helping one another in terms and in times of difficulty. I mean, most of us came up under very, difficult and humble conditions. But we never felt that we were poor because of the social system and the networks that were in place within the village that made everybody feel like they were good enough and they were, as good enough as anybody else. I think another important value that we seem to be losing is the idea that we need to go beyond just self and so-called ethnicity. I grew up in Kaur. I was born in Kaur. And in Kaur there are 3 different towns or villages: Janakunda, Turakunda, and the Wharf Town. And we all went to the same schools. We all spoke Mandinka and Wolof. In fact, some of the best Wolof speakers in that village or town were the fathers or the mothers from Turakunda and Janakunda. So it was a very cohesive society. Then I went to Armitage. Armitage was a melting pot. We were all the same, basically. We didn't see ethnicity as a dividing factor. And that has been lost. One thing, though, that I still like about Gambia, having been away for a long time, is the greeting. People greet one another. People say hello to one another. They smile. And you can see a guy who really, you can tell, is having a hard economic time. But you can hear the laughter coming from the belly. That is something we should never lose. Thank you.
I just want to say we're going to have to stop. We have the IG right outside. We have the CDS right outside. The last thing I want to do is not to be able to go home today. So please do understand my situation. I'm under so much pressure. And I want to thank all of you for coming. And I want my boss to come here now and give a statement, the Honorable Minister for Information, Lamin Queen Jame. I'm sorry, sir. They said I should stop. I should stop. My apologies. Honorable Minister, please. I want to go home too, you know.
A'udhu billahi minal shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Thank you very much, Mr. Drame, and for the audience to understand. My assignment is to give the vote of thanks for the gathering and for the participation of everybody. In the light of that, I want to begin by thanking the Office of the President, in particular, for the foresight they have in organizing this very important forum. Non-controversially, everybody has accepted and admired that it is important and timely. By extension, let me go to the organizing committee. Key among them, the Director of Press and Public Relations at the Office of the President, Ami Bojang Sissoho, for a very good work. We thank you for the vision, we thank you for the initiative, and encourage you to think and do more like this. To the panelists, from morning to now, the intergenerational dialogue, it may be difficult to call everybody by name, but really we are grateful and very thankful to all of you in your total numbers. Because time isn't there, we just have to summarize it that way. Coming to the matter, the business proper, I think this is long overdue. And it is as old as society itself. The idea of people coming together to look at how they are being governed, how they are governing, is as old as society. Then from primitive time, as soon as agriculture started, society started to be stratified. There became the need for some to be administrators, for some to be workers in different fields, and it was from there on that the necessity came for people to be talking about how they should be governed. And I think this is the reason why we are here. It was further developed, as somebody said here, with degrees. It was popularized, and I think from that popularity, people took it from there. But it is a tendency for every human society to be sitting together from time to time, talking about how they govern and how they should be governed. I cannot conclude this exercise without paying reflection on the founding fathers of our motherland, those who had strived here before us, who in the name of the Gambia took their time, took every trouble to put things together until we attain what we are now celebrating as 58 years of nationhood. Those founding fathers must be remembered and prayed for without them, this gathering would not have been. And we therefore thank them. It is an opportunity for all of us to realize that, frankly, what holds across history is the truth. We know and we have realized that different interpretations deriving from different conceptual thoughts were given to democracy. The reason for this, one reason I believe for this, is because it is foreign. In our local terms, I want to strongly believe that if democracy is anything accepted in our domain, it is accepted on the basis of being a best practice or good governance, if you like. But because it is introduced to us in a foreign language, everybody tends to describe or, explain it from the background that you come from. The legal practitioner will take the legal view. The development practitioner would take the development approach. And everybody taking the approach of the background that you are coming from. So that, in my opinion, the commonest denominator that we can use, and we all would have been in consonance, is taking democracy in the context of our culture. Because this culture is that had produced us. It makes me remember Julius Nyerere. Somebody cited the competition of the global capitalism and socialism at a point in time when they were struggling, and countries like the Gambia and other developing countries had to come up with the non-aligned status in diplomacy. Nyerere said to them, we in Africa do not require anybody to teach us democracy or socialism. For all of these are contained in the local culture that had produced us. Meaning, therefore, that within the context of the local culture that we have, democracy is one important ingredient. But has it been our concern ever at any point in time to look at the local context? Somebody also cited that there were great empires in Africa. Today, small states like Gambia are becoming ungovernable, Senegal, everywhere, becoming ungovernable, when Mansa Musa alone was able to administer the whole of the Mali Empire. Those medieval empires of the medieval period we reflect on, if that was possible then, how much less should we be able to effectively and efficiently administer ourselves today? Anyway, because it is a beginning, I hope we'll have time to very well progress on this. Once again, I congratulate and thank everybody for our 58 years of nationhood. And in the same vein, I congratulate His Excellency the President for also attaining 58 years this year, all on the same age as the Gambia is. Partisanship, let us be careful. Partisanship is driving us in a manner uncalled for, in my opinion. It is taking us to the extent that fundamental values of our culture are being destroyed, such as respect to elders, such as respect to leaders. And I think using religion would be a better ground. I agree with Dr. Barry. I think it was he who mentioned it here. For example, if you want to fight corruption, what is the interpretation, what is the position of religion on corruption? It makes me recall one Attorney General, whoever at a dinner in legal year celebration told us while I was a chief that his father had informed him that in the hereafter, judicial administrators will be divided into 3 groups. All 2 groups of them will go to fire. It is only one that has the chance to go to heaven. And who are these? First group are the people who are administering justice without learning, without getting a comprehension of the substance of the law that you administer. Or you know this very well, but for some reasons, you don't apply it as it is in the letter. They will all go to hell. It is only one, and that is those who know it and apply it in the best of their humanity, who stand the chance to be admitted in heaven. And I know that being religious people, this world, the planet, is a transitional stage. We are only transiting. So why do we have to destroy our hereafter, which is permanent, for this stage of transition? Anyway, thank you. I thank everybody once again for... Thank you.
We are dishing out tickets to heaven or hell. Please, ladies and gentlemen, send applications in. Choose your location and we will distribute this accordingly. We want to thank you, the Honorable Secretary General Salimata E.T. Toure, Nene MC Cham, the Honorable Ndeye Njai, my tutor, lecturer, Dean Nana Gray Johnson, of course my Professor Abdoulaye Sen, Dr. Cherno Omar Bari, and to my Imam Esa Bokarsi, and obviously to Aji Kumaka Dafe, and to everybody who has been here today, thank you. It's been phenomenal. And we are taking into consideration all suggestions for next year, inshallah.